In 1942, under Salazar's rule in Portugal, a police officer named Yasmim tells Chief Inspector Vargas about two French people caught for not having proper visas. When Vargas sees Laura in the holding room, he is struck by her beauty and orders Yasmim to have a female officer search her. Later, Yasmim checks on Laura's brother, Boris, who says he's a refugee from France. Not understanding French, Vargas asks him to empty his pockets. Boris takes out several items, including a cigarette pack. Vargas tries one and jokes about it being a girl's brand, making Boris laugh. Vargas warns him he'll cry soon. Meanwhile, Vargas goes through Laura's bag and finds lipstick, compact powder, and a lighter. Curious, he tries the lipstick on his own skin. Later, Madalena searches Laura, but finds nothing. Vargas then asks her to stop. In another room, Boris explains the contents of his pockets, claiming he carries insulin for his diabetes. Despite this, Vargas takes his items, suspecting him of using illegal drugs. Vargas then brings Laura into his office for more questioning. Laura hints she isn't a criminal, and Vargas tells her she's not an enemy since she doesn't have explosives. She admits their passports are fake, bought in Casablanca. Vargas warns her that using fake documents is a crime and they could be sent back to France. Vargas suspects that Laura and her brother might be spies, but she insists that they are refugees and that the names on their passports are real. Still, Vargas doesn't believe her and says he'll investigate further. Laura, desperate for safety, tries to charm him, offering both money and herself in return. Meanwhile, Madalena and Yasmim head to the police station, escorting Laura to the holding area where Boris is. On the way, Laura realizes her lipstick is missing, not knowing Vargas took it. Later, Yasmim reports to Vargas that Boris has morphine. When the officer asks what should happen next, Vargas assures him that he'll handle it. At a hotel, Vargas's daughter, Ilda, reads a newspaper article to her sick mother, Marta, about a refugee's harsh experience in a prisoner camp. After finishing the reading, Ilda lies next to her mother, wondering why her father keeps similar articles in his study, suspecting he's hiding something. As the French anthem plays in the background, Ilda hears her father's footsteps and rushes to return the newspaper to his study. Inside, she finds a photo of another woman and feels confused, quickly returning it to the cabinet and locking it just as her father approaches. Ilda then heads to the kitchen where she meets Diolinda, the housekeeper who is preparing a meal. The teenager asks where Vargas is, but Diolinda doesn't know. When Ilda says she'll go find her father in the annex, Diolinda stops her, saying it's forbidden to go there. Ignoring Diolinda's warning, Ilda insists that she clean her mother, Marta, after she soiled herself. She then goes outside and runs into Vargas, who tells her she can't go to the annex. Ilda follows her father inside, telling him that Marta had looked at her earlier. Surprised, Vargas asks if it's true, and Ilda confirms it, explaining that she read the newspaper to her mother after school. Ilda then talks about her day at school, mentioning that she recited a poem for French class. Excited, she stands on the stairs and recites the poem for her dad, but Vargas thinks it's too mature for her age. He says he'll talk to the nuns at school, but Ilda begs him not to. Later, while Vargas feeds Marta dinner, Ilda mentions that the doctor has seen progress in her mother's condition. She's hopeful that Marta will get better soon and be able to serve customers again. Later, Ilda looks out of her father's room window and sees him heading to the annex. When Vargas leaves, Ilda checks his coat and finds a woman's lipstick. She doesn't know that the lipstick belongs to Laura, who is staying in the annex after spending the night with Vargas. After their time together, Vargas and Laura reflect on their experiences during the war. He then shares a story about how he got a scar from when a mortar hit his platoon, trapping him under the bodies for a whole day. After the war, he decided to become a police officer for his own safety. Laura, on the other hand, tells him that she and her family were vacationing in Midi when the war started, and they decided to stay there. Before leaving, Vargas tells Laura to keep quiet during the day and reassures her that she and her brother will soon have visas for England. Once Vargas is gone, Boris, who had been hiding in the closet, comes out. He laughs at Vargas's war story and then gives his sister a back rub. While Ilda is with Diolinda, she reads a Bible story about Lot's older daughter suggesting to her younger sister that they find a way to preserve their family line. Diolinda finds the story hard to believe and uncomfortable. Ilda insists it's in the Bible and continues the story, explaining that the daughters had children and named them Moab and Ben-Ami, who later became ancestors of their people. Ilda then teases Diolinda, saying she should go to the house of the Ammonites. After finishing the story, Diolinda remains uneasy about the story and says she would prefer if Ilda read about baby Jesus. But Ilda explains that the story is from the Old Testament, not the New Testament. She says she prefers the Old Testament because it's more dramatic. Later that night, Ilda sleeps in her father's bed, hiding her deeper feelings for him. The next morning, Diolinda finds Ilda still in the bed and scolds her for skipping school. But Ilda just keeps sleeping, unaffected. The next day, after school, Ilda visits her mother and places a flower in her ear. When Ilda leaves to get a newspaper, Marta touches the flower, showing signs of improvement. Meanwhile, Diolinda and Yasmim are talking late at night. Ilda overhears them and then hears Yasmim ask Diolinda if she's noticed Vargas bringing any French visitors lately. Diolinda replies that there haven't been any visitors since Marta got sick. Suddenly, their conversation is cut short by Vargas's arrival. Diolinda is worried he'll find out about her relationship with Yasmim, so she asks him to leave. Ilda runs downstairs to greet Vargas and later goes to visit her mother in her room, turning on the radio for her. That night, Ilda confronts Diolinda, asking if she likes Yasmim. Diolinda admits that Yasmim is not the type of man she would want to marry. Then Ilda asks if Diolinda could ever be with her father, but the housekeeper is offended and tells Ilda to leave the room. When Ilda asks about the French people staying at the hotel, the maid explains that Yasmim had been acting a bit silly earlier. However, Ilda believes there is indeed a foreigner staying with them. That night, Vargas visits Ilda's room and asks her to sleep. Ilda says she wants to sleep early and finish her book tomorrow instead. Before leaving, Vargas gives her a kiss. But Ilda pulls his head toward her, which makes him pull away. He's annoyed and tells her she's too old for that and to go to sleep. Ilda feels like her father doesn't like her anymore. After he leaves, she decides to find a way to win his favor again. Later that night, Laura leaves the annex and walks around the hotel. As she returns to her room, she hears someone calling for their mother, and she turns her head in surprise. The next morning, Ilda wakes up and goes to the kitchen, where Diolinda reminds her that she's late for school. When Ilda notices a teapot, she gets curious. The housekeeper tells her she's practicing something and doesn't explain further. That night, Ilda looks out the window and sees the maid coming back from the annex. She questions the maid about feeding a French woman in the basement. The housekeeper tries to explain that she was just cleaning there. Despite her explanation, Ilda doesn't believe her and stops her from leaving, demanding the key to the basement. The housekeeper pleads with her not to, fearing that if Vargas finds out, she could be sent to Tarrafal, a prison camp in Africa. Ilda takes the key, but as she's about to go to the basement, Diolinda stops her and says that Vargas is also down there. This makes Ilda change her mind. She asks the maid what the French woman looks like, but Diolinda says she hasn't seen her. The maid just leaves the food tray outside the door. Ilda then asks where the room is, but Diolinda refuses to tell her. Ilda threatens to tell her dad that the maid gave her the key. Terrified, Diolinda finally admits that the French woman's room is at the end of the hall, near the closet. Later that night, Ilda goes to the annex and uses the key to open the door. She finds Laura sleeping. When she hears someone approaching, she hides in the closet. Ilda watches as Boris wakes Laura to ask for the morphine Vargas gave him. Ilda overhears their conversation and learns that Vargas gave Laura the keys to the hotel. Laura tells her brother that they can stay at the hotel and leave whenever they want. However, Boris seems worried they'll be sent back to Poland if they're caught. Laura thinks Boris is only saying this because he's getting morphine for free. This offends him, but Laura apologizes, saying she's tired of being locked up all the time. She then tells him a joke, and they both laugh. The next morning, Ilda wakes up on the floor and quietly leaves the room, passing the sleeping siblings. At the hotel, she takes Laura's photo to her mother's room and falls asleep beside her, unknowingly leaving the photo on Marta's stomach. When she wakes, she tells her mom about her dad's involvement with a French woman and urges her to get better. Diolinda enters, scolding Ilda for missing school and warning that Vargas will be angry. Ilda tells her not to interfere. When Diolinda asks if Ilda went to the annex, Ilda lies, saying she changed her mind. She whispers to her mom that she'll end the French woman's life. Later, Ilda finds a new passport and a resignation letter from Vargas in his study, suspecting he may leave the family for the French woman. She visits the refugee's room and sees disturbing drawings. Boris admits he drew them and says they're from his imagination. When Laura arrives, Ilda tells her she's Vargas' daughter and asks them not to tell him she's there. She warns them to leave, lying that Vargas is dangerous. Laura doesn't believe her, but Ilda insists she's telling the truth. Ilda reads a story about a prisoner who lost her sight and hair in a camp. Laura asks if Ilda's a communist, but Ilda denies it, saying she just wants to protect them from Vargas, who might send them to a camp called Tarrafal. Before Ilda can finish, Laura says she's a communist. Realizing it's getting late, Ilda prepares to leave, asking if the refugees plan to stay. Laura says they won't leave yet, but Ilda suspects they might tell her father. Laura asks why she's asking, and Ilda reveals she found Vargas's fake passport and resignation letter. The siblings are surprised, and Laura dismisses it, but Ilda warns her not to take her father away. Boris worries about their future, fearing they'll end up in a camp. Laura admits she didn't know about the passport. Boris asks what they'll do if Vargas decides to leave with them, but Laura doesn't know. When Laura stands, Boris notices her blue dress and asks about it. She says he bought it for her in France, and now she wants to give it to their mother. Feeling lonely, Laura remembers their mother with the authorities. She tells Boris it's not his fault, but he blames himself for leaving their parents behind. Laura wishes they had returned to Paris, where everything could have been different. Diolinda is surprised to find Yasmin in the kitchen. He threatens to make her reveal where the French refugees are, warning her if she doesn't talk. Vargas arrives and questions Yasmin, who asks to speak privately in his office. Inside, Yasmin tells Vargas the refugees and their files have disappeared, suspecting they're hidden in the hotel. Vargas denies it, saying he only cares about his share of the money. Yasmin threatens to ruin his career and mentions photos of fake passports taken by a colleague. He also reveals the landlady recognized Vargas at the guest house. Yasmin gives Vargas 3 days to settle the money. Ilda overhears their conversation and seeks comfort from Diolinda. The next morning, Ilda finds Marta missing and calls for help. They search but can't find her. Diolinda suggests Ilda tell her father, fearing Marta went out on her own. Ilda rushes to the annex, thinking the refugees took her mother. She screams upon finding Marta dead. Yasmin realizes that Vargas has been hiding Boris and Laura. Yasmin thanks Ilda for earlier contact out of fear for Laura. Laura locks the door, but Yasmin demands the key and strikes Diolinda. Ilda hits Yasmin with a gardening tool and tells Diolinda to leave with the refugees. Ilda mourns her mother. When Vargas returns, he finds Marta missing and Yasmin dead. Ilda confesses to Vargas that she's responsible for both deaths and sent the refugees away. She tells him they're now alone.
Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell icon, and stay connected with us.